Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy. But America's agriculture landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertising campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. From the producers who make your food to the store where you buy the final product and everything in between. This is Real Ag. There are 4 basic elements plants need to grow. They are air, nutrients, sunlight, and water. Here in Kansas, air, sunlight, and nutrient-rich soil can be abundant on much of the land. But what about water? Kansas can go through cycles of floods and droughts which can cause great problems for farmers. So how do farmers control the flow of water where they can to best irrigate the fields? We will take a look at irrigation farming on this episode of Real Ag. Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
In Kansas, there are different types of farming used to harness water for growing crops. Some farmers get enough rainfall in a year and do not need irrigation to get water to the fields. This is called dry farming, where there is no need to divert extra water to the fields. Many farmers aren't so lucky and must use some form of irrigation to send water to their fields. One type of irrigation used in Kansas is center pivot irrigation.
When we refer to center pivot irrigation, maybe a better term would be mechanized irrigation. It's a way that we put water in a pipeline and then we use that pipeline to deliver water to the field. And a center pivot is a device that has a center point, that has tower structures associated to it, that spans and waters traditionally a quarter section of ground and waters in a circle. So center pivot irrigation are those green circles you see from the airplane. And they range from just a few acres to 500-acre circles. That's center pivot irrigation. And then there's linear move, which instead of going in a circle, they go lengthways. They go across the field. And so there's a lot of linears in different parts of the country. But it's mechanized irrigation is you're using a mechanized device to apply the water to the surface.
This piece of ground started out as dryland ground, and then irrigation was drilled, and then it was watered out of a ditch, which wasted a lot of water, and then an aluminum pipe came along, and this was flood irrigated for years and years, and that was more efficient, used less water, less leakage, and now we use sprinklers, and we can precisely apply how much water the growing crop needs. As the crop matures and grows, its water needs increase till it reaches its maximum amount that it needs to use. So by using the sprinkler, we can put on just the amount of water that the crop needs, and we use a lot less water that way.
Much of the water in western Kansas is more than 100 feet below the surface, requiring power machinery to harness this below-surface water supply. Over the last century, these water supplies have been greatly depleted, and the need to conserve water has been a big issue for Kansas and the rest of the United States. So, on a typical farm in Kansas, how much water gets used?
Well, that would depend on the year. This year we had a lot of rain this spring, and so we're not going to use nearly as much water this particular year as we would in a normal year. We have amounts of water we can apply. We can put on like 18 inches a year, up to that much to a particular piece of ground. But this year we're not going to use nearly that amount because of the rains early and then the rains here just recently. The state of Kansas limits all irrigation by how it was set up when the original water rights were set up, and most of the ground around here has 18 inches of water that can be applied. per acre. So, like I said, this year we're not going to use nearly that much. And we're lucky where we live here, fortunate that we're on the east edge of the Agala Aquifer, and we do have recharge from the rivers here. So sprinkler irrigation is just much more efficient than flood irrigation that we used to use. The next step in efficiency would be subsurface drip irrigation. A field was just had that put in this spring, and so this is our first year of using that, and it's even more efficient and uses less water than a sprinkler does.
From being involved in the pivot irrigation for so many years and the drip irrigation for so many years, we know that there's more efficient use of the water with drip irrigation over a pivot irrigation. And the simple reason is that drip irrigation applies the water in the soil, so it doesn't have a chance to run off or evaporate or lose any of the content to the atmosphere. Pivot irrigation applies from the surface, and so there's always chances of runoff or evaporative issues or wind loss, sun loss, all those other things that come along. Dragonline is a patented process that we combine the use of drip irrigation with the economics of mechanized irrigation, which if you put drip irrigation in, you'll spend $1,500 to $2,000 an acre. If you add Dragonline onto a center pivot, it's $200 to $350 an acre. So you can do a lot. You can convert a lot more systems, or a lot more acreage faster with the use of Dragonline than any possible way of saving water through drip irrigation with the use of Dragonline. And you have all the flexibility. If someone installs Dragonline and on a really low gallonage well and they for some reason run out of water, they can move that to another pivot or move the pivot somewhere else and continue to use it. You don't lose the use of the drip irrigation in the soil, because once you put subsurface in, it's gone. And if you run out of water, it has no use. To ask what is Dragonline, it is transforming center pivot irrigation through drip technology to get the same benefits as drip irrigation with the use of a center pivot. And in our slogan, we say transforming center pivot irrigation through drip technology. It's not by chance we've done this. It's learning over the last 40-some years of how water reacts to soils, how pivots operate, how drip irrigation is utilized. And it's by marrying those two together that we can actually save 20 to 50% of the water that's being used today. And if we'd have been doing that from day one, we wouldn't be in the process we wouldn't be in the predicament we are today about running out of water. And one thing that really spurred my decision to work with Dragonline or the process of mobile drip irrigation, one day I heard a hydrologist say, Monty, if we could save 20 to 25% of our water today, our aquifer would last probably 30 years longer. I said, wow, it's not a big challenge to save 25% of our water if we just work at it. We could save more than that, and it depends on the cropping, the genetics of the seeds that we use, the fertilizers that we use, the types of soils that we try to irrigate, all those things considered, it should be no problem to save 20 to 25% of the use of the water today, so we can have that for the future. And then not only our business is located here in western Kansas, and it derives on people irrigating, but it's all of our livelihoods. I mean, it's more than a business here. It's our livelihoods that we are here in western Kansas and eastern Colorado and Oklahoma Panhandle and Texas. Of all the things we do in agriculture, the biggest common denominator is the use of water. And without water, things will really change. It's the tax base in every county. It's the school systems, it's the churches, it's economic development, it's oil and gas. Everything will change if we don't have the use of water. So it's the biggest single common denominator we have to really be focused on to save. And I guess we've tried to coin the slogan, if you want to call that, or our purpose of why we do what we do, is to make every drop of water count. Because every drop of water adds up to save. The thought of mobile drip irrigation has been around for many years. I mean, probably for 25 years people have tried to do different things. But until recently, and recently I'm saying in the last 10 years, new technology has come along to develop new emitters that are pressure compensating. And when I say pressure compensating, that means that regardless of the pressure that you have inside the tubing, it emits the same flow. So it's very precise application. We have so much technology coming in. I mean, we have all this modern farming techniques and internet-based programs and you name it, everybody every day comes up with some new idea. And I think just the technology or the challenge that challenges me and growers is all the information that comes to us every day that potentially could make a big change, but how do you discern all of it? Because you just can't do everything. And I think, it'll all come together and work together. I don't think just any one thing will help change any more of the technology we have with really operating tractors and combines and variable rate irrigation, variable rate planting. But I do believe that what we do with Dragonline will be the biggest change, the technological change. The biggest thing about change and farmers facing change, they're already set up doing conventional irrigation. They made a change from dry land farming to drilling the first wells to irrigate, to flood irrigation. And then they went from the ditch to gated pipe. That took years and years to get that done. Then from the gated pipe, people started putting in an underground pipe to run water where water didn't run downhill. They could take it different places. And then pivots, when they came along, people just put pivots on their worst soil because they were just hard to make that old soil pay or that old hill. And then as economics came along with the use of center pivots, they put center pivots on their best ground because they could grow twice a crop with the same amount of water. So as people have went through this change of stretching and making the water go farther as they lost water, we've come to a new challenge now. Well, how long can we keep irrigating? That was never a question, I don't think, in the past. How can we learn to use small water rather than all this big water we had? And so the challenge is, after farmers have made all these changes and went to center pivots and trying to use the best technology they can, what is the next step? What's the next proven step? And that's where we're at today, is proving that our Dragonline does what it says. And we're doing that.
Drip irrigation is a type of micro-irrigation system that has the potential to save water and nutrients by allowing water to drip slowly to the roots of the plants, either from above the soil surface or buried below the surface. The goal is to place water directly into the root zone and minimize evaporation. So how much water can be saved by converting to drip irrigation?
We believe that you can save 20 to 50% use of your water with Dragonline over traditional center pivot irrigation. And when we talk about the efficient use of the water, sometimes it gets confused with a lot of the manufacturers in the business. They say, well, we have 95 to 98% effective application of the water. And application and efficient use of the water are two different items. Spreading water with a spray device on a cement floor without any wind, you can have very good application rate. And that's what they're talking about, is applying water to the surface in a high efficient rate. What we talk about is the use of the water. We believe we can save 20 to 50% of the use of the water because once the water's delivered directly to the soil, we eliminate wind loss, we eliminate evaporative loss, we eliminate the sun, we eliminate foliage loss. The water doesn't set on the leaves and evaporates. When you take those things into consideration, with a large gallonage well, when I say large gallonage, 600 to 1,000 gallon a minute, there was a test ran quite a few years ago on the efficiency of watering at night versus daytime. And I believe at that time they said you could save 15% of your water if you watered at night rather than daytime. And 15% doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 125 gallons a minute at 800 gallons. Well, on my farm that I bought, I just have a total of 200 gallons to water 2 pivots with. Do you still lose that 125 gallons a minute? And I believe the answer is really yes. It's close to that because you spread that water out all over the surface, on the leaves, regardless of what gallonage you have. So small gallonage wells lose a greater percentage of the water than large gallonage wells. And if you did that with my 200 gallon minute well, I'm lose more than 50% of my water, watering at daytime versus nighttime, if that was the case. When we're talking about the efficient use of the water versus the application rate, we believe that we save 20 to 50% of the water for those reasons. Most of the sprinkler manufacturers that make watering devices will say that they're delivering water at 90 to 95% efficient application, and they do. I mean, there's no misleading in that. They do apply water that. What we talk about getting the efficient use of the water, we get the water in the ground. And on small gallonage wells, which we've talked a little bit about in some of our earlier discussions there, we believe that goes up much higher than 50%. If you're watering on a spring day and the wind's blowing 40 miles an hour and it's 80 degrees outside, 80 to 90 degrees, I believe you lose 80 to 90% of your water. There's really no reason to even water. You might as well save your water. But with Dragonline, you go out there and it's applying to the ground. It doesn't matter if the wind's blowing or not blowing. You're getting the water in the ground. So that's the big advantage to what we do with saving water.
Drip irrigation can be beneficial to many farmers and can help save water and money in the long run. But what is the initial investment needed to convert to drip irrigation? And what is the maintenance needed to upkeep it?
Well, it's very expensive to install this drip irrigation, and this will be our first year for using it, and we've had so much rain we haven't had to use it this year. Over the long haul, yes, it will increase efficiency. It's going to take a little while to pay back the investment, but it applies water even more precisely than a sprinkler does.
The initial investment is more, but when you add up the gallons that you're wasting all the time, it becomes less expensive over time because you're getting more efficient. You'll raise better crops, you'll have better quality of crops. So when we say is it more expensive, initially it does cost more to install, but over a 2 or 3 year period of time it'll pay for itself and you start saving instead of wasting your water.
Maintenance is just like any other piece of machinery. Maintenance is pretty minimal. As the pivots get older, of course, they wear out, and I have one older one that I've had to spend some money on this summer to keep it running. So one of the advantages of pivots that they're only as good as the dealership that services them, and we're fortunate in this area to have a very good dealership that will come out and repair if something goes down wrong, like a motor or a switch of some kind. They're generally here within an hour, if they can be, and fix it and it's back up running.
I'd have to say the maintenance that's involved with the use of Dragonline will vary. When you compare it to the use of subsurface drip irrigation, it's tremendously less. If you ask about the servicing of it versus traditional spray nozzles, there's more maintenance with Dragonline. The offsetting factor is you get so much more benefit of the use of the Dragonline to save water. And when I say if you're having issues with Dragonline, the biggest problem we have with Dragonline is rodents or coyotes or varmints that will want to chew on the Dragonline while it's laying in the field in the idle time. While you're watering, they never bother it because it's wet and they get a drink of water. At the end of the season, when you shut off, they'll smell that water or they sense that water's inside there and they'll bite it trying to get water out of it, I believe. To eliminate that, we have growers that just pick it up and roll it up and tie it up on the system at the end of the season. That eliminates the problems of rodent damage, but it does take some time, and it may take 1 to 2 hours to do that, and it'll take a little time to cut them loose at the start of the season, but that eliminates a lot of issues. So when you ask if there's a lot of maintenance to it, there's that aspect. And some grounds, they don't have all the varmints, so they don't even have a problem laying on the ground. So it just depends on where you're at in the country. When we transform your pivot to a drip system, we do have to monitor the water quality. And if you have organics in your water, your pumping supply, you're pumping from a canal, or there's iron bacteria in your water, you have to treat that water so it doesn't become a problem with plugging your emitters in your drip system. Which with drip irrigation, that's common practice. With the center pivot guy with big holes, you don't have to worry about it as much. So you would have to address that. And you do have to filter your water with a filtration of 80 mesh, which is about half of what you need for subsurface drip. But it is more than you use for center pivots. So filtration and filtering and sand, that would be something to take into consideration. But if you do all these things up front, and you know these up front, they're not a surprise to anybody, and you just deal with it and go on. If you really want to save the water, I mean, it's not that big a deal.
With new irrigation technologies coming out with the ability to make greater use of the water we have, why do we need to conserve water?
With our purpose of making every drop of water count, we've really become aware of, if we don't save water today, what will happen in the future. We know what's happened from not doing anything different for the last 50 years, from when we first drilled irrigation wells. We've depleted our aquifer, depending on who you talk to, 50 to 75%. And we've done that in a really relatively short period of time as everybody's drilled wells and pumped this water. Now we're trying to decide, to cut back the use of water, to try to save our water today so we have some water in the future. And if you look in western Kansas, a lot of people think we're just wasting all the water. We're wasting the water here, but we grow so much economic value for the state and for the nation here with the use of water. Within 75 miles of where we're sitting here today, I think there's over 20,000 head of cattle slaughtered for meat every day. I don't know the number of hogs, but it's a tremendous amount of hogs. The ethanol facility that's within 75 miles of us, they use over 70 million bushels of corn a year to make ethanol. It just goes on down the livelihood that this water delivers to us here today. And there's so many papers been printed on, if we don't have the economic value here of water, what that amounts to in 20 or 30 years. And I think water brings almost a $20 billion factor to this area in revenue. And if that's lost, what happens to this area? What happens to the state's economy? What happens to the national economy?
Yes, I think every irrigator is probably very concerned about the depletion of the aquifer. We're very fortunate where we farm here that it's not a major concern. Everybody is very concerned about water usage and how much, usage, and we need to leave it for future generations. Everybody's concerned about that. This particular area, like I said, is fortunate that we do have some recharge, where farther west in Kansas, they don't have recharge. So this is a good area to be an irrigation farmer, or better than some places.
It's so important that we have water available to keep doing what we're doing. We have to learn how to raise the same with less. And so when you ask how important is it to save today so we have for the future, it's not, let's wait and see what happens. We have to react today. We have to start saving today, whatever it is, the normal homeowner use. Say, well, I don't use that much water. But it's been proven that a homeowner can save 50% of the water without any issue if they just want to. And that all adds up to the whole amount of water that we use in our area here. It's our life. It's our livelihood here in the plains to save water. When water has a value, it doesn't matter whether you're a little producer or a large producer. Everyone wants good crops. Everyone wants to get the most out of what they apply. So it should be applicable for everyone.
Irrigation is immensely important to farmers in western Kansas, and using the water to its greatest efficiency can help save water for future generations, as well as reduce costs and improve profitability for the farmers themselves. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Real Ag on Irrigation. As always, you can check out this and other episodes of Real Ag by going to shptv.org. From the producers at Smoky Hills Public Television, this has been Real Ag. Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.